Hey, everybody. Guess what? It's the first Friday of the month. And you know what that means? That means it's the return of the Crimis. Steve and Chris, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here
Thank
today.
you. Oh, it's good to be back, Robert.
Yeah.
See you.
One of the highlights of the Friday FARcast, one of the monthly highlights. And I know that people are really looking forward to us diving back into Kazakhstan and kind of continuing where we left off last time. And I know we've got a bunch of material that we haven't covered. We're going to go back and try to, get back in the flow and see where we left off and recover some of that material as well. And it's going to be a great show. It's going to be a really great show. We've got some interesting things to talk about with Turkey and what's going on with Turkey and even Afghanistan in some ways. Like there's a lot of really interesting things kind of going on in the global theater behind the Corona narrative and script, and they bear looking at. So we're going to get into some of that as well. And an official welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. As always, good to see you. Good to be here.
And we're actually coming to you from West Palm Beach in Florida.
I see the palms behind you. It's a dead giveaway.
Apparently, it's a theme here.
Yeah.
There's palms everywhere.
Okay, well, maybe quickly, Mercury retrograde moment with the car yesterday.
Sure, go on ahead.
So we rent a car, and it's a semi-smart car. And it,
smart Alec car.
And it ends up being a smart Alec car. So, we're driving to go to visit friends. Diane and Ivor, who are friends of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so we plug in the phone into the jack into the car and get for the directions. So I was giving it directions, and it says, "Do you want the car to come out?" I said, "Great, it'll come out of the car speakers." And then at some point, I guess I had somehow turned the radio on, and it was like AM radio, and all of a sudden this immense static starts coming out of the speakers, right? So so you can't even hear the GPS directions. So finally, when we're working out, I think we pull over, try to figure it out. Finally, hitting the menu, it's like a little screen that's in front of it. Keep on hitting the menu. So I see the menu button that says home. I said, good, maybe I can go back and find out, where to shut the thing off. So I hit home, and what happens is it starts giving us directions home.
Right.
So we got home. But I don't know who's home.
So the car's home.
The car's
home, right?
I think must have been China.
So we got conflicting directions coming out from the iPhone telling us where we're going, and the other directions coming out telling you, turn. No, don't turn. Go straight. And it's going back and forth. Anyway, I felt like a complete Mercury
And then the hood of the car. Then we're driving in the hood of the car.
And then the hood of the car was flapping. So
what a wonderful automated future we have ahead of us.
So Chris came up with a great idea.
What was the idea?
About the rental cars.
Oh, so I had, as all this is going on, and in my head, I go into my imagination and I'm saying, they really should have a category of car rentals where I can go in and say, I'd like to rent a 1957 Chevy, please.
Mm-hmm.
They have a whole fleet of cars for people who are older than millennials. And then you'd be able to tell how old people are by what cars they're driving.
I'm sure Greta and AOC would be more than happy to endorse that economic model.
I think so.
I think that you can actually, I think there are actually rental or leasing vendors that offer those cars.
Is that so?
So yeah, you can get them. I think in the larger cities, you can get specialty cars like that if you want them. Then again, all you have to do is go to Cuba, and that's all they have. So
that's right.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, and I actually saw this really interesting show on the Discovery Channel, and they have a lot of the car shows on that channel, right? Mm-hmm. And it was basically a show on guys that are into cars and customizing and modifying cars in Cuba. And they don't have the machine works, they don't have the parts. So the things that these guys have done to kind of jerry rig and do things to these cars to keep them going and also upgrade them, totally fascinating. Really fascinating.
Imagination.
That's the old necessity, mother of invention.
And we've been denied that in a lot of ways because of all the luxury and the instantaneous gratification that's been on hand for a very long time.
The thing thing is that we didn't ask for that. That was foisted upon us. Oh, you want this. Oh, you want this.
Right.
You want
They create.
you want high speed. You want convenience. You
Mm-hmm.
want luxury.
Right. That was, sort of the creation of the perceived need.
And that's
Yeah.
and that's well, it goes back to Freud's nephew,
Bernays.
Bernays, right?
Bernays.
He created that kind of a culture, and then going to the 50s and the instant dinners and all, the gadgets and all that,
dinners. Anyway, that's
So-
Because they wanted to make sure that when the liberated woman left the home, that she could come home at night after a hard day's work and just slap in a few TV dinners so that everybody could get fed, right? I mean, that was a lot of the premise behind it.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and I remember as a kid, just like, wow, turkey and stuffing right here,
That's
and
why.
and that little cobbler,
I love the TV. I'm sorry. I love the TV dinner. I'm not going to lie.
That's what I'm saying. I love
Swanson
them.
turkey TV dinners. They were the best.
Yeah.
I had my favorites. The turkey was really good.
It was high on my list.
Also, the Salisbury steak was really good.
Yep.
I enjoyed that one.
I never learned how to cook until I was like 35. I didn't know how to cook.
And then it's like, well, what else is out there? Oh, Van de Kamp's enchiladas and Van de Kamp's fish and sticks. And there's a whole universe of frozen foods that were available to us, right?
Yep.
Yeah, funny times, interesting times.
So
I got a really interesting little tidbit about Bernays. Are you familiar with this guy Fomenko, Anatoly Fomenko?
No, I haven't heard the name, but go ahead.
Anatoly Fomenko was a Russian mathematician. He's still alive. He's in his 70s. He's a Russian mathematician. And he was conscripted by the Soviet Union to pay attention to Western news and to document Western news. And what he realized was that about 70% of the news that he was documenting was fake, false news. So he said, if they're doing this contemporarily, have they been doing this historically? So he set out to look at the Western narrative. And there's a whole series of books that Fomenko has created about false time and false history.
Yeah.
It's very controversial, and some of it is very interesting. And recently, I was asked to be on a documentary. It was like a pilot to talk about this and to get into it a little bit. And one of the things that Fomenko really zeroed in on was this guy named Scaliger, who was he was French and supposedly knew all these different languages, supposedly had all these different cultural sources, and that Scaliger is the guy that falsifies the narrative of Western history. And he's a Scaliger. Scaliger. Yes, Scaliger, Scaliger. So you get in there, there's a really, really deep dive. And I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's very, very complex, very complicated. But essentially, Fomenko's thesis is that Scaliger and a bunch of monks created this historical, you'll hate this, Steve. You'll totally hate this.
I know where you're going. I know, because it's compressed history, right? So it's not
as
far back.
Right. And so people like Plato and Socrates aren't really Plato and Socrates. And if they are, they existed during a different time. Jesus didn't exist. He was actually crucified on a hill in Turkey based on Fomenko's findings, not in Israel. He's not even Jesus. He's, I think he's a Greek or a Russian. So there's all these really interesting, theoretically interesting pieces that go along with Fomenko's theory, and that really there's no such thing as the Turks or the Turks or the Mongols or any of these other people. They were really just part of some great Russian horde, right? That's another interesting kind of sidelight to this
so
stuff.
It becomes Russia-centric.
Right, and he uses things like the Dendera zodiac from Egypt to do timing, and there are different zodiacs he uses to basically anchor these historical events, or not, for that matter. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to talk about, I don't want to get too far into Fomenko, but the thing I wanted to talk about was the definitive biography of this guy Scaliger was written by Edward Bernays' father.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That was a roundabout, but yeah. Okay. That's
Whoa.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I had to kind of set that up, right? So you understood what I was talking about.
So yeah, I know. So it's like we're all in for the long con game here,
Right. Yeah.
or what, So
Yeah.
and and these are all the con artists.
Yeah.
And and apparently maybe
Oh,
there's a
con
whole
artists
maybe
is
it's
good.
a whole priesthood of con artists going way back. Who knows?
Well, I think that's probably the case, that we are dealing with a priesthood of con artists, and they've conned us into thinking that certain historical events occurred, didn't occur, occurred. And I'm not buying into flamenco, by the way. I'm not a flamenco
Right.
loyalist, but I do think that historically we've not been given the full story.
So it's always been fake news.
Right. So right. So the question is, there's something there, and you always have to work it out.
And what is flamenco's first name?
Anatoly.
Anatoly. From Anatolia.
From Anatolia.
Anatoly flamenco. And it's kind of interesting because when I was talking with these guys they were very smart. They were very smart young guys, and they're putting together a whole series of videos, hopefully for this network, kind of like their version of Ancient Aliens. They reached out to a bunch of people. They reached out to me, Jay Widener, Cliff High, and they were very, very smart. They were very smart. They were very switched on. They knew the flamenco material inside and out. And I said the one thing, and I'm not sure they wanted to really hear this from me. I said the one thing that I have misgivings about is that theoretically this could be a massive tool of demoralization. I mean, if you really look at it in its totality, and then I brought up Yuri Bezmenov and the whole idea of classical demoralization of the West, and that this would be sort of the atomic bomb of demoralization if this thing really took hold and people took it very seriously.
Right.
And by the way, this will get into kind of where we're going to go at the end of the show, which has to do with these kind of parallel realities, these dualistic models of reality that are running simultaneously, different channels of information, all that stuff. We'll get to that at the end.
Right. Yeah. And to just, back up to what you were saying, that it's, I forgot what I was going to say. Jesus Christ. It's too early to be doing that. The demoralization having to do with, that's what you do to native people, Aboriginal people. The first thing you do is you take them off their land, and their land is connected to their mythology, to their history. Every little hillside, it has a name to it, has a story to it.
Spirit of
and to do that on the scale of Western civilization, it's enormous to take away, our history.
And take away the language. I remember.
Yeah. But go ahead.
What's his name from Malidoma Somé? A lot of people know Malidoma Somé.
Yep, the healer.
I think he grew up in Burkina Faso, I'm not sure, in Africa. And he said that when he was growing up, his father allowed a Jesuit priest to kidnap him and take him to the Jesuit school and raise him, take him out of the village. And they were all brutalized, okay? But he said that one of the most cruel things they did to the children, keeping them from speaking their own language, that among themselves, that they were to report on each other.
Oh, so classic communistic tactics, right?
So I heard,
or Jesuit.
Yeah,
Jesuit. Yeah. Ani speaking her native Spanish dialect from Cuba. She would be punished, right? So I would tell on her. And what they would do is they would hang a rotting chicken around that child's neck. The only way that child could get rid of that was to tell on someone else who was speaking their own language. And then they pass it over to the next person. That's what they did to these people.
That's some insidious MK Ultra shit right there, right?
And that's way, 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 way back. I mean, he's probably like my age. He's probably in his 70s, right? And this is when he was growing up in Africa. That's what the Jesuits did to these children.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway,
wow.
off we go.
So should we just introduce Ani quickly?
We need to say,
we have a special guest
hi
here.
to everybody.
And
Yeah,
Ani,
we got a special guest today.
We're going to get hit with a literal blue wrench if we say anything
The
bad.
monitor
Look who it is. It's Ani Brito.
in the flesh.
She's wearing her High Priestess,
Yes.
Lioness High Priestess white attire today.
Chris and I are both in white.
That's right.
We didn't even plan this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
Pretty synced up.
Yeah, apparently somebody else did though. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's great to see you again, Ani.
Good to be here. I'm on the sidelines monitoring here with
Yeah. Is Steve in the house? Mr.
And by the
Ryan?
way, Ani, you look great.
Thank you.
You look
Thank you.
fantastic.
She does.
Thank
Doesn't
you.
she look
She does.
radiant?
She's radiant.
She looks fantastic. Yep.
I've been on a diet. I've lost some weight, but I just ruined it by bringing some. Digging in myself.
She came in with these wonderful pastries.
You came with the Cuban goodies, right?
Yeah.
She did.
It's a
She
celebration.
They
It's a
couldn't make it down
celebration.
to Miami, so I thought I'd bring a little.
And we're just
Miami
like-
to them.
Well, all right then. We will eat
Yeah.
whatever you
Well,
give us.
Hi,
Well, good.
everyone. Good to see you.
We'll talk to you later, Ani. Say hi to everybody in chat for us.
I will. I will.
Wow, isn't that a delight?
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be able to see everybody kind of connect and orbit and constellate, and the group and the family gets bigger. It's really kind of an interesting phenomenon to be part of, to be honest with you.
Uh,
Yeah, it's kind of
Astonishment.
Yeah.
it's a trip. So getting back to this demoralization thing, which that's a mind-blowing story, Chris. I had no idea that.
I never forgot it. I
Yeah.
never forgot it because I have a vivid imagination, and when I read something, I get visuals, strong visuals.
Michael Jones has a story like that comes out of his book, Libido Dominandi, and he talks about how at one point, I think, the Israelis made this excursion into Gaza, and it was a kind of a lockdown thing, and then they immediately started. This is early on. This is like, I think, maybe going back to like the early 70s or something like that, and they started to pump a soundtrack like of erotica and people having sex into the local area because so I believe this was in Gaza, and the Israelis did this. And so they did this to demoralize. I'm pretty sure it was Gaza. I know it happened. Michael talks about it in his book. And it's another kind of model of demoralization. And because obviously those people were not into that, not part of their world, not part of their practice. And then you can even go more recently to the South, where they started to take down the statuary of the South, Robert E. Lee and all these other people. That's all about demoralization. That's all. It has nothing to do with eradicating the so-called wrongs of history.
No, it has to do with eradicating the cultural memory.
Yeah.
And who you are as a people, and
Yeah.
what obstacles you've overcome. So instead of looking at a statue, okay, if you think that was a wrong that was done,
Yeah.
but that would be a reminder, look what we've overcome. Why are they trying to manipulate it and say that this is something that's being honored?
Right.
That way of looking at it.
It was really interesting because right around that time I was listening to these guys who had an AM radio talk show that they put up on YouTube called Battle Nola Radio. And they were very interesting, and they were actually going down and like cleaning these monuments. Like they were thinking, well, we got to take care of these things. And then when they started to get into it, that's when things started to get turned up. And this guy, Walter Isaacson from the Aspen Institute, started to go to New Orleans and really put his imprint on New Orleans. And that was part of his job, was to get those statues removed. And of course, the city government and the state, they just went right along with it. And then the statues came down, and then shortly thereafter, that radio show was off the air. Like those guys weren't doing their show anymore. You can still find some of their YouTube videos. They're a little dated, but they're really, really good. I really thought these guys did a good job. So what do you think's happening now? What's going on? Speaking of demoralization, let's go to Syria.
Syria and Turkey, right? That's really,
Oh,
it's
sweet
barely,
Jesus.
barely able to keep up, especially because it's, it's all, everything's being occluded by the virus stories. So, we got two big, one possibly huge thing, which is the pullout of the the potential pullout of our troops from Afghanistan after 19 years now, 19 lunar cycle years of just
Occupation.
waste of money, and obviously a lot of people got rich and off of poppy and off of minerals, etc. But the fact that Trump has at least signed something with them,
Peace treaty?
and it's always telling everyone's jumping up and down, oh, it's horrible. How can you make a deal with these people? Then you know who's invested in what's going on there.
Right.
So that's one big thing. And then really this whole thing of Erdogan, who is, has got, several screws loose. And now I think the springs have come off also. So he first, I guess, I don't know whether he thought he could handle Putin or what was going on, but, he creates this buffer zone into Syria. And then also he's now got Turkish forces in Libya going against, I guess, there's whatever, there's always like the rebels versus the generals or whatever,
Right.
And so there's that split, because wherever we go, it's kind of the British Empire again. We leave a country split against itself.
Right.
So he's been fighting with that, somehow expecting the UN to take his side, but not the UN, but NATO. NATO, of course, the NATO agreement is we support anybody who's been attacked. We don't support you when you attack somebody, at least theoretically. So he's expanding into Syria. So Bannon talks about this a lot. How Erdogan has these sultanate kind of aspirations to reestablish the whole Ottoman thing, and there's a lot of evidence for that. But now it seems like he's actually doing it. So he's moved into Syria, and he wants to so the big battle, of course, is in Idlib, where Russia is with Assad. They're saying we're here to restore the previous territorial integrity of Syria, which of course went out the window with Obama and Hillary Clinton. So to understand, in Turkey, there was I can't remember the number now, but there was something like 300,000 babies born of the refugees in Turkey. I mean, there are 4 million refugees in these camps on the Syrian border.
So when we were in Turkey in 2015, and we went all the way down to the Syrian border where Göbekli Tepe is in Şanlıurfa, there were 2 million refugees in Turkey at that time, 5 years ago. It's double.
Now they say there's 4 million, 3 to 4 million.
So when he unleashes these gates and lets people go, I'm trying to understand, are they all coming out of these camps? And they're all on foot.
Well, some of them are, yeah. So they're coming north, either that or they're going into the other coast. I mean, I think the majority of these people are just praying for the hostilities to end and to go home, right? They're not.
So where's home? Where's home for these people?
Syria. They're all Syrian refugees.
They're Syrian refugees.
So all the areas that are now being held by the various rebel factions.
So they're captive in that area.
Yeah. So they have these huge, massive.
Camps.
So you have to.
They're not even refugees. Let's just call them what they are: prisoners.
Kind of, yeah.
Right.
So you have to understand none of these huge tent camps, and you have to understand this is just a massive Mesopotamian plain, right? And so the thing that's also kind of interesting karmically is that this is the same plain that at the end of the Ottoman Empire, and we're going back almost exactly 100 years. This happened between 1918 and 1921. Was the what's called the Armenian Genocide. Where they did a massive exodus of several million Armenians from that part of Turkey. And what they did was they were marched out into the Syrian plain and just basically keep on going to hit water if you can.
Keep on going to hit Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it took them 100 years to get there.
And a lot did,
Yeah, absolutely. Los Angeles is the new Armenia, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and Iranians there too.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with them. And what's interesting also is that this is what happened was the Kurds took all their homes. See, what the the end of the Ottoman Empire. They didn't. It wasn't like the Ottoman soldiers who did it, but they actually got the Kurds to do it, who were really nomadic and kind of low end of the totem pole amongst all the peoples out there. And they said, well, yeah, you kick these people out and you can just have their homes. And they just, basically that's what happened. All these villages were just repopulated by the Kurds. So the Armenian section became the Kurdish section. And not to be, and my research, one of the reasons they did it, it wasn't like they just woke up one day and we want to be rid of Armenians. But the fact is, and the Armenians will never admit this, so I won't say the fact, but what, my best guess is that so the Turks are fighting in World War, the Turks at the time, the Ottomans were fighting World War I. The Russians come in and get the Armenians to be on their side.
Mm-hmm.
And said, so you get on our side, against the Ottomans, we'll give you your own country. We'll give your own country back. I mean, it was its own country, of course. And so they sided with the Russians. And then when the Turks were kind of finished, that was a big reason, at least at the time. But that's nothing that the Armenians, so the Turks said it never happened. The Armenians said we were just sitting around minding our business and they kicked us out of the house. And so, so that I come with what, hopefully is like the most likely scenario of what happened. Definite overreaction, and definitely a lot of people died on that. But anyway, back to where I was going, it seems like some sort of karmic, thing where they have this huge refugee situation on their soil where they did this to the Armenians.
Right. So they still have to deal with it. It's just a different kind of manifestation. Yeah.
Come back. I don't know. Anyways.
This is really, very interesting stuff, because when we theoretically pulled out of northern Syria, which I'm not sure we actually really did. I mean, there are, of course, petroleum facilities that are being guarded heavily by either troops or private contractors, one of the two. Mm-hmm. Everybody thought, oh, it's going to be the Kurds. The Kurds are going to get slaughtered. You're just leaving the Kurds to deal with themselves. And that was the big hue and cry, right? Our friends, the Kurds, our allies, the Kurds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're not even talking about the Kurds. We're talking about the Syrians now. And we're talking about the Turkish aggression towards Syria. And it's like, nobody ever really mentioned that, right? All these people say, oh, the Kurds they're going to be lambs to the slaughter. Well, no, the Kurds they're just going to go right past the Kurds. They're going to want to go right into Syria and take this thing over. And the former administrations have done such a great job of demonizing Syria that if and when these things do happen, people won't care. Oh, Assad got what was coming to him. Oh, he gassed his own people and all this other bullshit, which is a lie. And I even have my doubts as to whether Assad is even alive. I haven't seen any interviews with him lately for a very long time.
Maybe Tulsi is the last person to see him alive.
Really, proof of life here. I want to see proof of life with Assad.
And where's Ruth? Maybe Ruth's over there.
Let's see. There was the last thing I saw was Assad, Putin, and the Russian patriarch were all together.
So what was that? Was that not long ago? Was that fairly recent?
It was maybe. I think it was this year, maybe January.
Okay, all right.
So that's the last I've seen of him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Erdogan is having trouble getting what he wants, and so he's unleashed the Kraken by opening his borders to so like where we stayed in Turkey in 2015 was right across from Lesbos, which is what you just see. It's just almost skip a stone across to it. And so they're all going there by boat. So now the Greek army is stopping them from going any further. So now,
right.
So now they're in this sort of
naval ships out there and troops.
So now they're in this no person's land because Erdogan's got the Turkish army stopping them from coming back.
And then you've got the Greeks turning the migrants away now. Like they've had enough, right? It's like no more.
That's it. They send
no more.
And armies, and they're like, no.
Yeah. So we're starting to see some pushback in that arena, with the forced migration.
Where do they go? I mean, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. So they pile up on the seashore. Where are all the people?
Yeah.
You know, physically,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
picturing this, like, where are they?
Right. Well, this idea that that they have to go anywhere is kind of ridiculous. It's like they have a place, right? You can go in there and you can try to get out of your NGO kind of, bullshit and actually help create something for these people in a real way, right? In a real and suitable way. But that never happens. And so what they'll do is they'll use that as an excuse, get them out of there, and then take their resources and do whatever they want to do with their research, because now they don't have to worry about these people anymore. Right. It's just a classic kind of bait and switch. Right. And people have no idea that this is going on, or maybe they do, but I don't think many do.
Yeah, and we also have to remember too, there are almost as many in Jordan. I think there's I think about 2 million Syrian refugees in Jordan also, which is a small country with not a lot of resources. I mean, I guess they're getting help in some sense to take care of these people, but so I guess it's just kind of an update because this is going on right now. It's all under the radar. I think it's huge. And I just read something on Zero Hedge, maybe it was this morning, thinking that this may be Erdogan's last stand. It's like a really big gamble. He tried to stand up to Putin. Putin's not having any of it. He says, no, we're restoring the territorial integrity and we're going to kick you out of Idlib. And he started feeling it when Turkish soldiers started getting killed. It's all fun and games until that starts happening. And all of a sudden your people say, what the hell are you doing here?
Right.
Well, there were some Russians that got killed too. There were like, I think 22 Russians that got killed by some kind of a missile sortie or something like that the Turks had launched. And I think that Putin, whoever Putin is, has amazing restraint in a lot of ways.
I think so.
And restraint in a way that somehow looks like it's capitulation, but it's really not.
Right.
No.
There's something else going on underneath the surface all the time.
Very self-contained. And you don't know what he's thinking.
And he doesn't have to worry about elections every 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He took care of that, didn't he?
It's a long game, right?
He took care of that.
Yeah.
What did he do? He fired
there's no more. Yeah, he became
whole cabinet.
Well, he became president for. Yeah, he did that too. Yeah,
fired his whole cabinet.
They resigned, didn't they? They resigned.
Right.
And they resigned because they were basically consenting to him doing this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't resign because, well, maybe they resigned because there was a Kalashnikov to their heads. But they said, okay, we're good with that. You do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, interesting stuff.
So yeah, it's just a few things that I guess you want to bring up. It's kind of like I said, it's under the radar.
That's what's in the ethers.
And I think it's big, and in Libya too. I think that whole thing is something's gonna come out of it.
Right. Right. What's really interesting, staying in that area a little bit, what's really interesting is the amount of coronavirus cases in Israel. They've got a significant amount of coronavirus cases in Israel. Apparently there's about 1,000 people are being quarantined right now.
Is that the same?
Yeah.
Is it for the same reason as Italy, having all the Chinese workers there?
Probably because China has been working with Israel hand in glove with this one belt, one road thing.
Oh, there you
go. And China was, the United States had been managing the deep port in Haifa. They have a deep port there, and the Chinese now have taken over that port and the management of that port. So you lay in bed with a dog and you get fleas, right?
Yeah. I forget. I just read yesterday too. I thought this was really interesting. So since the start of the year, it was something like close to 400, like 390 Chinese have been caught illegally crossing the Mexican border.
Right.
Which is just like, can you imagine that trip? I was like, how do you get? How do you get that? And what kind of funds do you have to even? Given the fact that it isn't really hard to get to here from China. Just join the army and say you're a student.
But how many people from the African continent are coming through Mexico as well? How do they get here?
So I guess it's about a year and a half ago, I started seeing pictures Chinese military and Chinese tanks in Mexico, by the way. So they have a military presence there.
Really, not just buying their tanks.
Yeah, there were tanks. I've seen Chinese tanks.
Well, I'm just saying, not
tanks.
just buying Chinese tanks, but they're actually
there.
military.
There, yes.
Well,
Yes.
So,
well, the Chinese have been surreptitiously planting themselves everywhere. Everywhere. Like in this country, you know that there are hundreds and hundreds of Chinese sleeper cells. Right. And they've been here for a very long time.
Yeah.
And a lot of them hanging out universities, either students or visiting teachers. And so this is the covert world that we've been living in that a lot of people don't know about or understand.
Right, and it's all been let in by, but mostly the West Coast Democrats.
Sorry, that's the truth.
And the tech companies. It's all vetted by them.
It leads me to think about who we have in place as translators, because Steve just finished reading and I'm now reading the Sibel Edmonds book, Classified Woman. And Sibel worked in translating for Turkish translations in the FBI after 9/11. And the book will absolutely curl your hair when you read how they embed themselves into the translating departments of the FBI.
Right.
Yeah, and they're just completely like hiding information, covering things up. This is not a problem, let that one go. And she exposed all that as a whistleblower, and really she's been under lockdown ever since. She's not allowed to even say what languages she speaks. And so it makes me wonder then, are there Chinese translators as well who are embedded and are performing acts of espionage within these State Department areas, FBI, CIA, right in the government, in the veins and arteries?
Wouldn't doubt it. Wouldn't doubt it at all. Wouldn't doubt it at all.
The book, it's an amazing read, and her show Newsbud gives you very detailed news on current events and politics.
One of my favorite movies along these lines, not Chinese but Russian, is a film with Kevin Costner called No Way Out. Have you ever seen it? It's a brilliant movie, and it takes place inside of the Pentagon. Like they shoot this thing inside the Pentagon, and it has to do with the murder of a call girl and a senator, corrupt U.S. senator, played by Gene Hackman. And Kevin Costner plays a naval officer who has like this kind of heroic standing. And he has an affair with this call girl who is played by Sean Young. And it's a very strange kind of turn of events thing. I don't want to give it away because if you haven't seen it, it's a really, really good movie from the 80s. It'll keep you on the edge of your seat. But the bottom line is that the movie shows that there is a high level of infiltration, even at an officer level.
Right.
Even at an officer level.
Right.
Well, this was pretty shocking because every time she reported a discrepancy to her superiors, they were corrupt. And then when she went higher, they were corrupt. The higher she went, the more corrupt.
Yeah.
So she completely
eventually
hung out to dry.
Eventually going up to Ashcroft and Mueller.
The whole system is infested with worms.
And I'm really sorry, but this is what President Donald Trump is fighting. This is what he's up against, and that's why they're so vicious.
It certainly feels that way. It certainly has that feel to it. Like, why else would he receive so much heat, so much fire, so much opposition?
To me, it's a no-brainer.
I don't think it's some form of psychologically operated high theater, although I think there are elements in there. But clearly, the guy is a threat. Right, he is a threat. Yeah, and all he's been dealing with has been one threat after another from this other group. I don't think they're playing skip to my Lou. I don't. but Trump needs to get better people, and maybe he has to do deals with some of these people. Like I think Bill Barr's a disaster. I think he's a disaster.
Apparently,
I agree.
Apparently,
He's a
And
gatekeeper.
he's
gatekeeper.
total gatekeeper. His father hired Jeffrey Epstein. I think Bill Barr was brought in to essentially extract Epstein. That was his role, and then the payoff was to absolutely crush any of the impeachment stuff, right? Like he would agree to do that, but then there would be this other thing that he would do, and then I don't know where they go from here, but got to do better. I don't trust that guy at all.
Well, that's the scuttlebutt. Everybody's saying, "What's up with Barr?"
Lindsey Graham.
And Lindsey Graham,
who's been a complete, what we would have expected.
Right.
It really feels like this. It really feels like this Corona thing is going to start to burst things at the seam. Like I think politically it's going to start to burst things at the seams. And
it's not a cover. It's more going to be extra pressure.
I think it's going to be a lot of extra pressure. What we're dealing with, obviously, is some level of accelerating chaos, right? We're looking at accelerated chaos. And potentially every day there's, like today, the markets are down. They're really, really down again. So we've got that happening. We're seeing now like stores getting wiped out of all these supplies and materials. So things are starting to kind of get into this survival mode, this kind of, almost not quite panic, but there's chaos now starting to kind of, encroach from the edges. And when that happens, that's when people in power engage, right? For a number of different reasons. Number one, you may be looking over here and not over here, right? Complete misdirection. Number two, if there are a number of different things going on simultaneously, you can't deal with the one thing or the two things that people in power will initiate or activate during that time. So one of the things that I think will probably come out of this Corona thing when there is more chaos involved is that we could either see a real decided kind of effort to eliminate the so-called deep state, right? Or we'll see the reverse of that, which would be a lockdown, martial law. And are the two, now here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because now we're getting into Q territory, right. And I'm not a Q person, but there could be this kind of justification for martial law during a time like this. Like, oh, this is all happening for a reason, right? Because when this is happening now, we could go after the bad guys. And then at that point, you're going to have to go, okay, well, shit, it's out of our hands now. What are we going to do, right?
Right.
Exactly. So we're entering a very interesting time. And again, is this some kind of coup? I mean, because the economy of the United States could really tumble here, could really, really tumble. And a lot of people are on Trump's case about, well, you're not doing enough and blah, 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 blah. The guy's got to manage these markets. He's got to manage these expectations. He's got to instill some level of confidence. So the whole thing just doesn't become, a barrel of shit rolling downhill at 100 miles an hour, right? I mean, he's got to be able to do that. Now, whether or not anybody is truly qualified to deal with a crisis like this, I'm not even sure. I'm not sure. You don't get to practice this.
Right. And let's also put it back into perspective that, you're still more likely to die in this country from spontaneous combustion than from that, from the coronavirus. It's given everything, right? And I agree that, something's got to get us off of our addiction to China, right? China's good.
I agree.
And whether it's going to have to put us through some kind of crisis, because at least people are talking about it now, because the comfort's gone. And then it's going to be gone, and then soon the shit's going to be gone, right?
You've been held hostage. And let me just follow up about the death thing around coronavirus. Whether or not you actually die from it, you don't want to get it, because the symptoms and what people go through with this thing will make your life a living hell, living hell. And about the only thing that you can actually will suspend the effects are antivirals. You don't want to get it. You just don't. You'll experience things you've never experienced before getting sick. You're going to wish you want to die. Misaki sent me a text from a friend of a friend who has it, and it's very graphic and it's not pretty. It's not pretty. So even if you pull through it, you really don't want to get it, because there can also be serious damage, like heavy duty lung scarring, things like that. And the only thing that apparently picks this thing up is a CAT scan. Like what's going on in the lungs is even picked up by X-rays, MRI, and MRI is the only thing that picks up what's going on in the lungs with this. I watched an interview with some of the families from the Seattle area who had people in that life center where a lot of them have died, right? The elders, and very heavy press conference. Very heavy press conference. This one woman, her mother was there, and her mother had died, and she called into the center, and they said that her mother was still alive, and that was not true. And then she finally sorted it out, and the woman said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't update my chart." Right? I mean, it's like, it's like that kind of stuff is crazy and crazy making. And there's a guy who was like the spokesman. I think he is like Irish or Scottish, and he had an interesting accent. And he actually called the CDC because his father-in-law is still inside of this care center. And he spoke with somebody. He had to wait 2 hours to talk to somebody at the CDC. And then when he got somebody, they took all the information, and he wanted his father to have a test. Father-in-law have a test. And CDC said, well, do you want to escalate this so it can happen quicker? He said, yes, I'd like to escalate it. So they took more information. And at the end of all the intake, he asked them, so when do you think you'd be able to attend to my father-in-law, and give him a test? Oh, 7 to 10 days.
Why?
7 to 10 days. Yeah. So again, whether or not this is going to be like the raging pandemic that is going to be, connected to the Spanish flu, it points to some real weaknesses and vulnerabilities and highly suspect malfeasance in our system.
Right.
Really bad.
I would have to
Really bad.
Yes.
So if that's the response of the CDC, which is supposed to be like this, major bureaucracy, don't expect them to help you. Just don't expect them to help you.
No.
Which means you got to take care of.
They owned like 72 patents on vaccines.
Oh yeah, I mean, this whole thing with the CDC.
Think that they're, cures.
No, they're deeply invested in the economics, in the capitalization of disease.
Right.
That's what they do. You have people that work,
which is the CDC Foundation.
So foundation, great.
Be aware. See, I made this mistake because I thought when they were saying CDC Foundation that they meant the CDC. Well, no, they don't. The CDC Foundation is a spin-off. It's a foundation that supports the CDC.
Private.
Mm-hmm.
It's private.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you need to know that when you're talking to someone. Well, okay, so when I was under the misunderstanding, I thought that the foundation, then I thought that the CDC was a private corporate entity under the .gov banner.
Mm-hmm.
Not true. CDC is federal. CDC Foundation is a foundation that supports CDC.
Interesting. So is it like an umbrella for the CDC? Is that what it is?
No, the CDC would be the umbrella. And then the foundation, there are many foundations that I guess financially and intellectually support
I think
the CDC, that they get their...
I think it's a steering organization, making sure that they, that the right vaccinations get adopted by them, things like that.
And this article was written by Kennedy. So is it, I got all the Kennedys mixed up. Is it Robert Kennedy Jr.?
He's the one, yeah.
So he's the one that Trump kind of assigned to be the vaccine person.
Right.
It was an article that I saw that he had written.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go back because I kind of got it mixed up. and I wasn't really paying attention the first time I read it. Had to go back and reread it, and then I understood that the CDC has many foundations, subsidiary foundations that are independent of, but closely intersected with.
And we know how the foundation game works.
You know that game.
Yeah. Well, why don't we transition here a little bit?
Yeah.
And let's get into the
subject,
the stuff that we were doing, the subject of the day. Let me just go into the chat here. Let's see, what do we have here? Don Hart says, I'm on Chaga, CD3K2. Good. Let's see, Diana says, wasp spray. CDC is a branch of the Gov. That's what Cato says. BB says CDC is so corrupt. I wish I followed my gut and got the hell out of here. Okay. Hope it's not too late, Cato. And let's see, what else we have? Maury says, I've been taking C and D3 lately, 1,000 milligrams of C, 4,000 milligrams of D3. Maury, I think you can up your C a little bit.
Yeah, we make our own. We make our own C and the liposomal, that's important. If you're not taking liposomal, you're only getting 1/10 of that and peeing the rest out.
Sigurd Huntington says, plague is the easiest way to trigger people's most primal disgust reactions. Everything comes to the surface. Abstractions are rendered meaningless. That's absolutely true. I talked about this yesterday, where we just go right into the root chakra, right? You know, it just takes us right into the root, and everything becomes kind of root related. So let's reset. The reason why we're talking about this next subject matter is because we were exploring the history of Kazakhstan, both sort of, how do I say this, economically, socially, technologically, politically,
and mythically.
And mythically. And the Crimis had put in yeoman's work on this. And then they had an interruption during the last show, and we basically decided to put a comma on that show. And here we are. This is what happens after the comma. This is the second part of the show, and the recap. We don't have really a lot of time to get into the recap.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to do is jump in to this really interesting structure called the palace, which is a pyramidal structure, right? This is the one you're talking about.
Well, we went through that on the last show pretty well, but we can, if you want to do a quick, we can do a quick.
So do you want to get to the tower? Do you want to go to the tower?
That was probably a good place to start. And
all right.
I will say, though, if you want
and you guys just froze.
The first show, I would highly suggest you subscribe to.
I don't know why you just froze. Oops. The Crimis have been put in suspended animation. Okay.
Are we back?
You're back now.
Well. Okay.
You're back now. Says my inner.
I think that was Donnie hit us with the blue wrench, I think.
Uh-oh.
The blue wrench.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, here we go. The great ovum, the great uterine canal, and the egg.
Fallopian tube.
Right.
Yeah, the fallopian tube and the egg. There we are.
So so this is called the Baitarek Tower, and this is the first thing that was built when brief background. Right. So Astana became the capital in 1997, and so to commemorate that, this tower was built for that year, 97 meters tall.
And one of the reasons why they moved the capital from, I'm forgetting the name of it, where it was, can't remember the name, was that there was a concern about earthquakes, and so they moved it to a different location for that reason.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And because also it was too close to the Chinese border. And so also, they wanted it to be more central.
And also close to where they were doing all the nuclear testing,
right.
And all this sort of horrific stuff.
Did you see where they were burning down Chinese restaurants and Chinese businesses in Kazakhstan?
No, I know they closed the border to them.
Yeah, no, they were burning Chinese restaurants and businesses.
I did hear that.
Okay.
In the last month.
Well,
Yeah.
that's some pretty serious shit. This tower, so this tower is emblematic of the central myth of the Asian plains. Okay, and so this is how far it goes back. I'm reading. This is the book that we use as some source by Frank Albo, Astana: Architecture, Myth, and Destiny, which is, a gloriously beautiful book and heavily propaganda towards the president or the ex-president Nazarbayev, Nur Sultan Nazarbayev. Astana, the capital, is now called Nur Sultan as he stepped down last fall. But I thought this was interesting. So this is from the tale of Etana. Sounds
like
awful close.
E-T-A-N?
It's one of the oldest Sumerian myths from 2000, over 2000 BC. And so this is a line from it. So they planned a city, the gods laid its foundations, they planned the city, let Etana be the architect. He had built the tower, the shrine. In the shade of that shrine, a poplar was growing. In its crown, an eagle settled. Okay, so the myth, this particular myth that this building, this structure is based on, goes back 4,000, over 4,000 years. And what it is that, so the great bird called the simurg or the samruk. The simurg is more the Persian word of it, and we'll get to that easy because there's a great Sufi tale having to do with that. The simurg lays its golden egg in the top of a poplar tree. What happens beneath the ground, so it's the three levels of reality. It's the underworld, the middle world where the tree is, and then the upper world where this golden egg is. So there is a serpent and his family and other evil beings that live underground, and the serpent's name is Bapu. And what Bapu does every time the golden eagle lays its egg, Bapu comes and eats the eggs. And this cycle happens over and over again.
It's Bapa, B-A-P-A.
B-A-P, Bapa? I said Bapu? Oh,
Yeah.
Bapu is
B-A-P-A, Bapa.
What happens is that, so then a hero from the middle realms comes and destroys the serpent. Thus the egg is able to hatch. Now, what is the egg? The egg is the cosmic egg, which contains all possibilities, right? The whole possibilities of existence come out of the cosmic egg. So this goes on over and over. You see it in India. It's called the Hiranyagarbha. So the hero comes in, and he's kind of rewarded with a flight on the Golden Eagle to heaven. Okay. So not only you see this, so this goes back 4,000 years, and so and it also, goes back into one of the foundational, I'll call it a myth, of Islam, is Muhammad's journey to the night sky and the back of what's called Barak, B-A-R-A-Q, and so he rides to heaven on that, and that's
the night journey.
It's called the night journey, where he gets up to the throne of God, and according to the sort of Islamic thing, only the angel can get to the footstool of the throne of God, but only the enlightened human can get to the bottom of the throne of God. Okay, but anyway, so that myth gets recapitulated into Islam from Muhammad's journey. So it's really very important. And right, then you've got Garuda, who's the cosmic bird that Vishnu rides in India. So this is a ubiquitous tale.
And then let's talk about also in how we saw on the bas-relief in Cambodia, the snake. What's the name of the snake again?
That's Naga, I don't know.
The Naga. Yeah, well, the churning of the Milky Ocean, and it's the snake is, has to be cut open and releases the waters of the Milky Ocean. So the realms of possibility with that's with the snake again. Yeah. And so
that goes back to the Vedas.
Yes. I'm having very different visions of snakes and milky oceans, by the way.
Right. Well, that's there too, isn't it? So it's all possibility is being released. And that's a sacred act.
Right. And then you can take that act and make it, you can take it from age to age, You can take it from day to day, or you can take it from moment to moment. And that's,
Right.
that's the real teaching once you become, very, very aware of how the movement of life works, is that it's a continuous movement back into the egg and back out of the egg. Let's just call it that way. Back into the unmanifest and released back into the manifest. And this happens what's called Kashana to Kashana, which is the smallest moment of existence. And what we do, this is why time doesn't exist, is what we do is we take these kashanas, which are these emergences and returns back, and we put them in a linear fashion, very much like cells on a movie reel,
Right.
form a moving picture to us. But it's a complete illusion, right? There is no moving picture. It's just one laid upon the other. This is what we think time is. This is why we think reality is an actual movement through time, when in fact it's just this movement in and out of the one, back and forth, back and forth. But our mind creates it.
So it's now and now and now and now and now.
That's a really interesting phenomenon in a lot of ways, and I think it's also worth re-engineering or back engineering, because again, I had this experience recently about 2 weeks ago where I looked at these various kinds of vignettes of my life that happened during a certain period of time, and to me they're always kind of isolated, like they're like more the model that you're talking about, right? Like I had these things, they happened, and that was the now, and then I was responding to being into now by whatever kind of reaction or survival or trying to get through the now that thing was. And then about 10 years later, I look back, and then all those vignettes and all those scenes did become a movie, right? They did become a movie, and there was kind of a beginning of that movie, right? And I'm not sure I'm at the end of that movie yet, by the way, but I could see it. I could see it in its totality in some ways. So just like it goes back to this idea that, well, the ultimate goal of existence is to transcend duality, right? Get away from the non-dual, and it's like I don't always believe in that. I believe that we could go dual, non-dual, depends on what level of perception and interaction we want to have. That's more of a holistic view of that kind of model.
Right. You have to live. Right. Well, this is the way the world works is dual. The way we function and move through the world is dual, and the way we perceive and manipulate and work through the world is through our bodies, through our sensorium. And our sensorium is the seat of everything,
and
all
then
knowledge.
You can also see that we overlay a narrative onto that movie. So we have chatter about what that movie is and what's going on. So that's interpretive as well.
Right.
So, however, that's why in
Siskel and Ebert, thumbing up and thumbing down.
In the yogic system, they have, you just knocked it out of my head. I lost it.
About the
Vedic system?
Well, let me just throw this in there while you're turning gears, Chris. It's like using what you just shared, what you guys are talking about. It really feels like in this time, we're all just people become prisoners of the moment, right? Prisoners of the moment. Like this means this and this means that, and there's such a dire sense that, oh my God, we've got to have Bernie to save us, or and there's no sense of kind of the long view or the historical perspective. We've got 12 years left, according to Greta Thunberg, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Who would know better?
Very sad.
Did you figure it out, Chris? Did you find the reference point?
I got it back.
Okay. What is it?
What I was reaching for is in the yogic system, in Eastern philosophy, the goddess Vach. It's V-A-C with like a little hook on the bottom. And that C is pronounced like a CH, so Vach is a goddess, and she's a goddess of speech and language. And it's a recognition that language is a goddess, and it creates worlds, so that you are constantly chanting the world into existence.
That's interesting.
It's a sacred act. So that's why it's so important to be like Don Juan would tell Carlos about being impeccable with your speech. So impeccability is important because your words create worlds, and you're laying a narrative over your life movie. So does that Give
Right.
some clarity to
And-
that.
Yeah, and Vach, I would say, is very close to logos.
Right.
The
Mhm.
ancient Greek
Right.
conception of logos, not so much as the literal word
Right.
as
Mhm.
it became, but it's very
It's
close.
it's interesting. There's this phenomenon now in pro sports amongst a lot of young athletes, and they talk about speaking things into existence, right? Like Pat Mahomes talked about the Super Bowl, and he says, "I spoke that into existence."
Mhm.
This is a big thing that's kind of going around in the world of, athletic and sports magic. Fascinating that it's trickled down into kind of that layer of our culture. Let me ask you about the functionality of this thing. I mean, what goes on inside of it? What's happening with the golden sphere?
Right.
Do you have any insight into that?
Right. Well, so it's a tower. So so the people who think that it's the Illuminati capital say it's a sun worship item, but it really makes no sense on that
doesn't,
level.
yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that it is, emblematic of this mythology. Now, if you go to, can you find the picture with the hand,
Let me
which is
see.
what's up in the top of it? So it's a tower that you climb, and get the panorama of this city. And there are two things up in the top section. One
Well,
of them
here's the view of it from night. Let's just give people. It's also another perspective of the tower, and you can see sort of the where it sits inside the city. So that's the tower. It's pretty spectacular, actually.
It is, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And in the back, you see that's the gas and oil center right behind it with that kind of little arch right at the end of the string of lights.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
So,
so
let me.
what it is that those spires at the end are the branches of the poplar tree. All right, the rest of it is the trunk. So the egg gets laid into the branches of it. Yeah, and it's the centerpiece. And if you look at all the major monuments or buildings are along this long avenue, very much like the mall in Washington, D.C. So yeah, so there's the view from it, and there you see the hand. It's going down this mall, and you can't see because of the support. But that hand is supposedly Nazarbayev's hand. Nazarbayev is fairly short. That hand is very large. I'm going to guess they might have made it a little bigger.
Right. Yeah.
But so everyone goes up. But what they're doing then, so people come up and they go and they put their hand, and it's for a long time was mostly the people of the city, and they put their hand in there, and by doing that, and then of course it's in a triangle, you're participating in the myth and the dream and the vision of the city. Now, what you can see also through there, but barely in the window as it's pointing out, those are the two golden pillars that are, emblematic, of course, of the Masonic two towers, Boaz and Joachim. And then behind that is the presidential palace, which is, hard to see through this. You can't.
Yeah. So it's all aligned. What do you know? What direction this is pointing by any chance?
It's general. I'm pretty sure it's north. No.
It would make sense to be east.
No, it's east-west. I'm sorry. It's pointing east. Thank you. It is pointing.
So this is pointing east.
Yeah.
Like to the sunrise.
Yeah. So it's a sun tower pointing to the sunrise. Yeah. So that's kind of like their mole underneath. And basically, they built this city, and then people came. It's, as I said, it's only started in '97, so it's 23 years old. And really, it's only in the last maybe 5 years that the city's actually populated. One, because they decided to build it on a place that was just like a mosquito swamp in the summer, and
like Siberia in the winter,
and a tundra in the winter, an incredible
wind. It was like a combination of Florida and Fargo, North Dakota, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. and probably like zero spring and fall, which is like
super extreme.
And I do believe they're having a massive tree planting project to break the wind, which is really brilliant.
Right.
So what goes on in that tower though? Are there offices there, or what's happening?
There's just that, and then there's this other sort of disc that has, when they had the Council of World Religions there, which you see the disc behind you, So they had the 17, what they were calling the 17 major religions, all of whom had a leader, and they all signed one of these boards. So this is what's behind the woman with the hand. And so that's supposedly to bring about peace. And then the pyramid that we talked about in the last show, which again, I highly recommend everyone to subscribe to Robert and get access to.
It's over on BitChute, by the way.
Yeah,
I have a channel on BitChute.
Yeah, so the pyramid in Astana is where the world religions meet every 3 years. So that's why some people are thinking that it's Nazarbayev is trying to make it sort of a center for world religions.
And the UN, I think, has a hand in it.
Right, and then at this point, I think you could probably bring in your point about the connection between the two.
Which two?
Well, between the White House and the.
Oh, well, I had, as we were doing our research, and yeah, we worked on this for about 2 months. This one is 3 now. But I had this kind of landed into my awareness that building that is the presidential palace is like a combination of our White House and the Capitol building. And it's got a blue dome on top of it. That's the only thing that makes it different.
I didn't make you say that.
And that,
I'm sorry.
well, I had this image of a cord, like an etheric cord that was reaching from that presidential palace in Astana all the way to the White House in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And it was like a siphoning of the energy coming away from the United States and into this new world capital. And they do want to make a world economic base. So rather than having that be on Wall Street, they're trying to make a whole new economic base be in Astana. So it really does feel to me as though there's a siphoning of the energy, the psychic and spiritual energy from the United States into this region, which is why I think it's so important that it be on people's radar screen.
So really what we should do is we should probably nuke this place, right?
Well, no, not necessarily.
It's low on my list of nuke places.
Because that way we would just take care of that whole issue, and the siphoning would just stop.
What kind of karma would you incur, sir?
Right, and by the way, it would also kill any coronavirus there too.
It would do that.
Right.
It certainly.
So I have this.
Had a really good point, Robert.
Oh, what is it?
I had a really good point. I wanted to bring. Well, actually we're not on camera.
Well, I just wanted to.
Put her on camera.
I noticed looking at the triangle with the hand imprint in it. They've made it so that it's the right hand, and the right hand is what gives out energy. The left we receive. So by having people put on their hand onto this triangle, which happens to be pointing at their governmental buildings inside this tower, it's kind of a charging station where everybody gets a little zapped out of them and put into this little triangle.
Very good catch. Yeah. Good catch. I was thinking that maybe it could also be something like if your hand actually fit in there perfectly, that a bunch of bells and whistles would go off, right? And a siren, and all of a sudden they would take you kind of like Willy Wonka, and then you would be considered like the new leader of Kazakhstan. Yeah, like this is a way to figure out who the perfect handprint is going to be to succeed this guy, right?
That's
apparently it hasn't happened yet. She doesn't fit.
Very Arturian.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. Good catch, Annie. That makes Ani. That makes a lot of sense. Let's get on to something else. She's enjoying herself.
It's good to have so many eyes on it.
She's enjoying herself. Huh? Look at her. Oh yeah. Is that a friend of yours? Do you know that woman?
She just shows up every once in a while. She's welcome as long as she brings the Cuban pictures.
Oh, you mean Ani?
No. The woman in the we know her. Getting the picture.
Who she is.
Nope, don't know her. We've never been there.
Public domain, though.
I hope she doesn't see this video and I get a copyright thing.
Yes, well, I hope everyone.
No, I'm just kidding. All right, what now? We have more esoteric. We have more esoterica here. Here we go. Hold on. What is this? Oh, come on now. Do your thing. Here we go.
This is what I mentioned. This is also up there. Again, it's kind of interesting, but so every one of the representatives of the major world religions came in and did a little sign on those. And I guess it's in Kazakh, it's hard to read. the
Mm.
the names of each of the religions, and what I don't know how they came to, which are the 17 best, but so that's what that is. And so every 3 years they meet in the very top of that pyramid. I don't know what they talk about, but so that's one of the reasons a lot of people, are interested in what goes on in this place.
And if you listen to Leo Zagami, I don't know, do you ever listen to him, Robert?
I have a hard time listening to Leo, I have to say.
We love Leo because of his accent, but he has a thing about the Jesuits. Well, his theory is that the Pope and Nur Sultan Nazarbayev are rivals to be the head of this one world religion, and that the UN is involved.
Yeah, well, apparently the Pope has coronavirus, so I think that this other guy from Kazakhstan might have a leg up on him now. So
he's doing a lot of coughing, but then Joey Ratz is waiting in the wings. So
yeah, I don't think they're going to bring him back. I don't think they're going to bring him back. I think they got the Black Pope ready to go. How come the Church of Elvis? How come the Church of Elvis is not in here? I don't recognize any of these as the Church of Elvis.
Or the Great Spaghetti Monster. Yeah.
They've missed a few of real. These may be the most popular, but there's some important religions I left out of there.
Well, let's see. Interesting that Africa is like the top of the. Top of it, and it's a bizarre map because it's real. I mean, look how small the Mediterranean Sea is north of Africa. So it's an old map. Look how North America, and South America are cojoined, and India.
That's true. Yeah.
This is like a map. This is an early explorer's map, right? This looks like something out of the 1600s.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it looks to me like it's a globe. Looks like a globe to me.
Or half globe. So it's a compromise between the flat Earth and the round Earth.
This would be dome Earth, by the way.
Dome Earth, right?
Dome Earth, right, as it's known. Interesting.
So why didn't they use the Bucky Fuller Dymaxion map?
Well, no, but they did that on. They did use Bucky Fuller on the other building.
Yes, they did. That's right.
Okay.
Wow.
We send all the pictures to Robert, so he has control, because otherwise
I've got the slideshow here.
Otherwise we'd be really in trouble.
He's the captain.
Let's see, what do we have? Okay, so this is is it the Khan Tower, or what is this? This is
right.
Khan Shatir, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is that's the big tent, right?
I mean, so they just turned Kazakhstan into a World's Fair. I mean, that's what they did.
Yeah,
basically.
That's a good description.
And you don't and there's some other pictures. I mean, there's like a beach in there, with waves, and it's just like this massive mall inside. And what they did, so again, this is going back to the, first of all, it's done in like Bucky Fuller, tensegrity kind of a foundation. But it's made to look like a traditional nomadic tent, sort of stylized and Disneyfied, of course, leaning in the wind. And the word means something like big tent or something like that. But the tent, again, like the tower, is emblematic of the Axis Mundi, and these people. That was their original deity, was the sky god, and the Earth Mother, very much like almost all Aboriginal peoples, work out that way. So, and then the pole in the middle that holds up the tent is the Axis Mundi, is the pole that holds up the entire universe. It gets replicated in ourselves, in our body, through our spinal cord, and then replicated in the places we live. It's just a continuous, macrocosmic, microcosmic interplay between everything, everything in your life, right?
Interesting.
And what are those two towers? Are they just housing or office?
Or government buildings.
It is.
You
know, it's magnificent, but I think you're right. It is sort of like Disneyland or.
Well, yeah. So the
World's Fair.
Yeah, the earliest residents, because I read a few articles, they were saying, well, I feel like I'm living in a stage set.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't feel like a real city. It feels like a stage set. And again, because that kind of architecture, it's done on this sort of, pseudo-mythic scale, and you don't have like a real human feeling to it, like traditional architecture has. There are elements that are human size, the size of hands, the size of humans, and you connect with it. Your soul connects with it. But, this one has some elements, but for the most part, this is a thing that's abstracted from your lived life.
Simulacra. Is that a chemtrail on the left?
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like they haven't been able to escape the wrath of the evil sky god.
Oh,
That's right.
Oh man, we watched it. It was bad here yesterday in Florida.
Yeah.
It was all on the horizon too until the end of the day. Then they went over the middle of the sky.
Yeah, there's a pattern to chemtrails that right around May, they begin to stop proliferating in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
And then after May, they go south of the equator. And then they start to spray South America and Australia and anything below the equatorial line, where theoretically it's more winter-like, except when you get to places like Africa, unless you go further south in Africa, because they basically pile this stuff on in the winter months, and the dimming and people's immune systems are more compromised, less UV light. So they focus their operational activities seasonally. So for those of you in the northern hemisphere, theoretically you're a couple months away from this abating a bit. For those of you in the southern hemisphere, it's going to be your turn to receive the dark blessings of the evil sky god.
Right. It's a good way to put it. Really not bad.
That building looks like a spaceship, doesn't it?
Well, there's one that looks exactly like a spaceship. I think I sent you that one, and that's called of all things, it's called the Circus.
So this is inside that building that we've just been looking at. It's pretty spectacular, I have to say.
Yeah, it's mostly a mall and kind of an entertainment park.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and
now we have the
opera house as well.
That's under the pyramid.
Okay.
And then this is like the night sky, right? This is would be indicative of the night sky.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then this is why they're big on the blue and the blue domes. So that's their big things is the blue of the sky and the gold of the sun, and the eagle. That bird is also gold. It's like a golden eagle.
Who was the workforce that built these things? Do you guys know? Do you know where they came from? Were they local help? Were they shipped in from the States?
I don't know specifically, no.
Good question.
But they probably, at the time that they were building it, their ties with Russia were very close. So I'm guessing, and also you have to understand when Kazakhstan was formed, the Kazakhs were a minority, weren't the majority. They were the most people, but they weren't a majority. They were still, they were like 40%. Maybe 30% Russians and 20% of some other indigenous group name, which I don't remember. So I'm guessing they pulled people from all over the country who were, after the Soviet Union went down, this is a way to put them to work.
Yeah.
So that's again inside there. You can see the struts. Looks like some kind of festival of some sort going on. They had, yeah.
No,
they
go
did
ahead.
have an expo there, 2017, the World Expo.
Oh, there we go. There's your World's Fair.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of Wizard of Oz in some ways too.
Mm-hmm. It has a surreal quality to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trippy.
And it's the surreal part of this. And again, I'm not going to denigrate the citizens or the culture of that country, but let's just say they were maybe at a time dwelling in sort of the early 20th century in terms of their lifestyle, in terms of their lodgings, in terms of their systems, right? Then all of a sudden you build this space age city, and then you drop a culture that it's like time travel for these people.
Yes.
I mean, that's got to be a trip. Total trip.
Cultural whiplash.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, and so these people, and yeah, a lot of these people living on the steppes in these small villages, I've never seen anything like this.
And now,
Yeah.
now they're living on Mars, right? I mean, this is
Right, that's it.
mind blowing.
So this is actually a beach that they have inside there because Kazakhstan, right, it's the largest landlocked country in the
It's
world.
huge.
So they have no
it's a
beach.
massive
So they,
country.
right, so they had to make a beach for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a trip. I just had this indulgent moment. Like, what would it be like to be high on mushrooms and hang out in that place?
Right. Oh, yeah.
It'd be
And it's like,
so
what's
interesting.
the time tunnel, that
I was
show?
just going to say,
Yeah.
I'm
Time
looking
tunnel.
at it, and
Yeah,
it's like going
it's
through a
a
time
tunnel.
tunnel. Oh, my.
Yeah. It was one of my favorite shows on TV.
Yeah, I love that show.
Wow.
That's black and white, right? That goes back to the
I mean,
black and
it's
white.
like
An
if you
Irwin Allen production.
Really?
If you had been through the MK Ultra program and you visited Kazakhstan, Astana, I mean, would it be like one big trigger for you?
Water, such a conductor in that.
That's
vortex.
right.
I think perhaps for some people,
Yeah.
or so it seems. Let's see. What else do we have here? Okay, we got this big ring. Is this a linear accelerator or something like that?
This is actually Apple. And what I guess I brought that in. I think there's that. Maybe the Gherkin is next because that's the architect who didn't build the tower.
So Apple has a facility there, or
No. So this, I just showed that to you because
this is in
the
California?
architect who built the pyramid and who built that tent is an English architect who's, I don't remember his name, and that's fine. But this is Apple headquarters.
Norman Porter, is that his name?
Norman something or another.
Oh,
Norman
maybe that's it.
Norman Fourier, or I can't see.
Something like that. So this is
So
actually Apple headquarters.
This is Apple headquarters.
Out west.
In California?
California.
Oh, in California. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense.
He built that. He built the Gherkin. So I just wanted to show you the kind of stuff that this guy, who's, the big architect.
It looks like a mini CERN.
Yeah, that's why I said it's in a linear accelerator because it has that.
What you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Ani's saying. Go ahead, Ani.
They always implement a pool or something circular with water because water is such a conductor of energy, and it's a natural vortex.
It's a portal. Yeah.
It activates the circle.
It's an AI scrying pool.
What I find interesting is that that center point is not centered. It's off.
Right.
So, to have a perfect kind of circle, perfect reception.
It almost looks like a yin yang thing going on there too, right?
Right.
It's just
see that? Yeah, just missing the other little circle here.
Yeah.
Well,
it's really
interesting.
Right? Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the guy who was involved in creating these other buildings, right?
So he built that tent, he built the pyramid, and I think there may be another building that he did.
And the Gherkin in London, you said?
So he did the Gherkin in London, and he did a bunch of famous. Part of the reason was this book that we read was the author of the book is kind of saying, well, all this is sort of an accidental Masonic attributions there.
There's no such thing.
And he would say, he said, well, I talked to the architects and they said, oh, there's nothing Masonic here. And it's like, this guy is one of the top 3 or 4 architects in the world. It's like he knows nothing about the Masons. It's a bizarre thing to say.
It's ludicrous and it insults your intelligence.
Yeah.
So this is the concert hall, and you'd never know it, but these various aspects are all done in phi ratio. So it's almost like taking the sacred aspect of the phi ratio and distorting it in certain ways. And I'm going to guess, being that this country it's a wind tunnel, I'm guessing like if you were on roller skates, you could probably make it all the way around in a few minutes. I'm guessing this is like a pure wind tunnel of some kind.
Yeah, imagine how that channels the wind.
But anyway, this is the national.
Just imagine. Yeah, look how if the wind came in here from the right and twirled around and went up that apex, it would just form a wind tunnel straight up in the air.
You could totally Mary Poppins this thing.
You could totally
think so.
Mary Poppins.
Or Flying Nun.
Flying Nun, right. Let's see what else we have here.
Yeah. Stuart,
This is old school. This is the mosque. Now, was this mosque before they started the
no,
build out,
no, it's
or was it
new.
part of the
It's
build
done
out?
traditionally. And I think it's the largest mosque in, at least in Central Asia. So that's very traditionally done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
Well-
and so again, so talking about sacred architecture, you know, people get all blown out of shape about minarets and things like that, but every aspect of that is human scale and combined in different kinds of ways, and the you know, I'm sure the proportions are all there, and there you see that pyramid building in the background off on the right there, corner of it. So yeah, I don't remember the name of the mosque, but that's a very traditional mosque.
Do you guys have any desire to visit Kazakhstan?
I don't.
Not really.
No.
Not really. I think I've seen enough of the buildings.
No, because I don't know. What went into its creation doesn't appeal to me. You know, I'd much rather go to a traditional country if I wanted to visit a beautiful country with a mosque. We'd rather go to Iran.
I'd rather go to Persia. Persia's on my short, you know, bucket list of countries.
I think that's
you know,
we're traditionalists. You know, we really appreciate the ancient arts and
the colors, the tiles.
If I went there, all I would see would be oil money. That's all. Everywhere I look, I'd see oil money.
This does feel like Disney.
So this is So that's the circus.
Hold
And
on.
that's, you know, I mean, it's a spaceship, pure and simple. That's what they designed it as.
So they have a circus here that goes on, like a continual circus. Is that right?
Probably by now it might be continuous. I don't know, but I don't know what else they house in there. Yeah. Well, it's
Who is
something like that. Well, it's just, you know, circus performer.
Philippe Petit. It could be Philippe Petit.
Right. Going between the
World Towers.
The towers.
that is such a trippy building. Like, let's throw a flying saucer in there somewhere. Come on, let's do the flying saucer thing. Oh, how about this?
That's probably their nod to the Vatican, you know, saying, okay.
The mothership. How funny. Very funny. I would be into going to visit this place. I'd be into checking it out.
I'm sure it is.
Well, you know, I've looked just to walk that mall would probably be really interesting.
Well, it's eye candy.
But, you know. Yeah.
This to me looks like Vegas. That's another thing that comes up with this place a little bit.
Yeah.
Vegas.
Right. Well, that's the comparisons are Vegas and Disney World.
Know where I want to go then.
No.
Look at that.
This is the oil and gas.
It's like the Arc de
complex.
Triomphe.
It's
Paris.
a little reminiscent
government.
of Paris, of London.
To me, this is Vegas. This is totally Vegas right here.
Yeah.
So, you know, you see the little thing in the middle, the tri-pointed thing in the middle reminds me of those spinning things.
It's a spinner.
Right?
Yeah. Totally. And all these kids had these spinners.
Right? For all the ADHD kids.
Everybody had spinners.
Yeah.
It was ubiquitous.
And that's sort of like a teardrop.
You know, and so it's kind of an industrial version of the you know, of the arch de triomphe, for the triumphant arches through which, you know, the armies would march, you know, when they return home from the city. So of course, but not that now, but it's the gas and oil which paid for every inch of that city.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, let's see what else we have here. Kind of getting to the end a little bit. I guess this is a river that runs through. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a river that splits the city. So all of these things are all these buildings you've been looking at are on the left bank of the river, almost completely. And which is, you know, the left bank is the, you know, as far as like Paris and all those places, and London, you know, the left bank is where all the cool bohemian things go on.
The intellectual side of life.
I actually thought this was, you know, kind of nice looking.
It is attractive.
You know.
The colors are bright and cheerful.
So I'm guessing this is, you know, one of the neighborhoods that few people could afford to live in.
What was I going to say? Where does this river empty into or come from? Do you know?
I don't know how far along it is. It may leave the country. I don't know.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, at least they do have some water there, right? I mean, it's like.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably why it's mosquito ridden in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Although if it's moving water, you wouldn't think. but it's a plain, so it's a flat area, and I'm sure when they get the rain, the waters probably sit long enough.
Right.
No, if there were.
There's
There's no map.
Or maybe on
in
the
book?
cover, the inside cover, there's an old map.
Oh, so maybe we can see what the river is by.
Before
Well,
the city.
Forget it. It's a really old map.
Is it the Turgai? What's the name of the river?
Oh, no.
I can't remember.
Here's a view of the city from the river.
Right. There's the two towers, and then again, that's the that building, that concert hall. Where I've seen a couple of videos that take place inside there, and they're complete Disney-esque performances, and they even have performances on ice and these sort of spectacles of these national singers.
Now, this is reminding me a little bit of IKEA too. There's some like IKEA energy.
Right.
Oh my
in
God!
there.
Yeah, the blue building.
Really?
What a hodgepodge, man! This place is a trip. Total trip.
Oh, you got it? Steve got the name of the river.
The river is called the Ishim,
Through
and
Kazakhstan.
so it
and
runs
Russia.
through Kazakhstan and Russia, and it's
How do you spell
slightly
it?
navigable.
How do you spell it?
Dam was constructed.
Yeah, it's
Central Astana.
it's not a
There we go.
yeah, it's not a
Spell it.
big
How do you spell it?
Ishrim, Ishrim.
Ishram.
So that's that's like a cover of something about their goals, So for 2050, they have a series of objectives and goals. Most of them have to do with the population and having everybody employed and everybody, happy and all that sort of thing.
Right.
There's, I'm guessing there's still a serious amount of corruption in Kazakhstan, and there are, for it's supposedly the center of world religions. Many lower religions other than Islam have been persecuted there. So it's it's an ongoing thing.
So you have 12 of these, right? 12. Right.
Yeah, they're very into, maybe tongue depressors are going to be the national.
Yeah, I was going to say it's either tongue depressors or Band-Aids, It's
Like thick versions of the Matrix.
Yeah.
The web.
So that's it.
That's the cube. Actually, if you look at it, it's cube.
There's a lot going on in there. So that's it. That brings us to the end of Kazakhstan. And do you have any final thoughts here on this city?
No, it's just, again, a lot of the, a lot of this sort of, New World Order city doesn't quite work. Then again, we're always faced with these like two false possibilities, right? So it's either, this Masonic Illuminati city, or it's this, city of complete peace and harmony and understanding, where all these people can live together, or maybe there's something else going on.
It's like utopian communities, they always start out sounding wonderful, and then you get inside them and it's like a trap.
Right. And that gets back to maybe this will lead into the end piece that I brought up to you earlier, which is, for the longest time at every, we just call them events, you get the two possibilities. So there's, for example, 9/11, you've got the government conspiracy theory, and then you have, the alternative conspiracy theory. And there's like two basic camps on the, on the impeachment thing with Trump. Just, complete opposites that have no reference to each other in reality, or in no shared aspects of reality, let's call it that. And so, but what we started to notice, and I was actually talking to this with Tiffany Fix-Henry the other day, I happened to hook up with her on trying to get her to produce some of our books as movies, which would be a great thing. But we were talking about it, I think it started with the Vegas shooting. So the Vegas shooting, they were, so instead of having these, the two possibilities, either it's, what the government says or it's what, it's obvious something else is going on. The Vegas shooting started having all these alternative possibilities. Were they shooting from this window? They're shooting from that window. Were the Saudis living on the top floor? Does it belong to Bill Gates? Were there
what's Ellen DeGeneres doing there with her slot machines?
Right. Were people getting shot on the bottom? Were they not getting shot? Were they herded through one gate? It was like one thing after another of scattershot of evidence that you just could not pull together into a story. Into a real narrative.
Yeah, right? the Saudi prince walking around there, right?
Right. I mean, which window, and then of course, Ellen DeGeneres, and the guy was named Campos or something like that. Would they give him season tickets to the LA Raiders, right?
Like Las Vegas Raiders.
Right, like he's going to be making it up from his hovel in Mexico. They sent him back to.
Yeah, and then there's a clearing of the Saudi princes, right? Afterwards.
Yeah, and then after that, there's but the point being that to really get it was the first one you really couldn't get a grasp of what's going on, right? And then it kind of also with Parkland, and then it really.
What about the Borderline Bar and Grill?
Oh, what about
Right. Well, that
that's another one
with nobody in there. Here's a film with nobody in it.
Here it is. Here's the film.
And all those people that supposedly been in Las Vegas were there to commemorate, the tragedy of Las Vegas, and
right, and there were a bunch in a third one too, weren't they? Another one, I can't remember. I mean, there's like, okay, so
they're on a reunion death tour, right?
I think so. I think I would follow their Facebook page just to avoid where they go, right?
Yeah, stay away from these people.
Right, and so then you had, and then you had it with a lot of other things.
Totally. I mean, going back to even the Santa Barbara thing, the first incel shooting, and L. Roger, whose father Peter worked on the Hunger Games and had all these very unusual connections. And then there was that weird video that came out like just about a week after that whole thing, and for all intents and purposes, it's Elliot Rodger like popping into the frame. Right. Of this random YouTube video. I was like, holy shit, what is this kid doing here, right?
David Hogg, whose father was like in the CIA or something. What was that?
FBI. David Hogg's dad's the FBI.
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 The other one
connected with some guy who was making weird movies, cartoons or something.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's what's his name? Cameron. The other loudmouth kid from Parkland. His dad is a weirdo, total weirdo.
And who organizes?
Caskey is his last name. I think the guy's name is Jeff Caskey. Total oddball. Yeah, and then even like David Hogg's father working for that, that intelligence company.
That's right.
Down it. And it's like, well, what's going on here? Then, so really, what you're saying.
And then get back, and then Epstein.
We have all these events.
What? And what's that?
And Epstein.
Right. Was he taken out? Was it really his ear? Whose ear were they showing?
Right.
Why is he uncovered? So in other words, so it seems
and
like
Barr's father.
Right.
Hiring Epstein.
Right. So it seems like a really concerted effort to just throw scattershot clues so that there's nothing you can grasp onto. All right. So this is the direction that I'm heading with this is to bring in now, instead of having like I'm right, you're wrong, it's a level of uncertainty, which is also gets back to the demoralization we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Because you have nothing to grab onto, and very few people can live in that place, which is really how life is. But very few people can live in that level of uncertainty. And the ancient Greeks had actually considered a sacred place, and they called it the Trihodos, means three roads. And for them, we would say we were at a crossroads, but most of our crossroads are X's. But for the Greeks, their crossroads were Y's. So they call it the three roads, the Trihodos. And this is a very, very actual sacred place to be in like when you're at a place in your life, when everything's uncertain and you don't know what to do, because you have to go someplace else to get the answer, because all the answers around you do not work. You have to go someplace deep within to find the answer of where to pick a road or no road or whatever.
And then isn't that even the X and Y chromosome?
Right. That goes back to that too.
Right.
Yeah.
So it all comes back, and maybe at some point it comes to resolution. Maybe it follows the path back through the X and the Y.
Well,
What's really interesting, Steve, if I can chime in with that for a second, is that in a time where there's like a greater kind of connection to an organizing principle, like say religion, let's say Christianity, right? But we know that Christianity has been taking on water, a lot of water, a lot of people walking away from the church, sort of less faith in some ways, right? So what is that thing that people can theoretically count on? They know it's there and they can grab onto that thing like a lifeboat. Will it be something like climate change or global warming or, or the whole Greta thing? Like, well, Jesus, at the very least, I know that the earth is in trouble.
right.
And we've got to stop this stuff because that's what's happening. That's science. And we've got generations ahead of us. And then they put the blinders on and that becomes, it's almost like this herding quality as well. So if there is chaos, if there is uncertainty, then people are more easily herded into things that they think that they can count on or at least become important to them.
But if you're alert and awake, what you come away with is that you can't count on the external, that you never find truth in the external, you have to go within. That it's the time of the teachers and the structures and the edifice of spirituality is not physical. That we all need to grow up spiritually and say that it all springs from the well within. And hopefully that's your takeaway.
Right. That's
Right?
why,
That it's not the church. Maybe that's where the churches are burning. I don't know. They're all in Europe, in France, they're all going up in flames. There's just one in Germany the other day.
Right.
So getting the bird's eye view and disengaging from the emotional component and the dependency on the structure that's artificial to give us our connection to the divine. Now we can only go directly to the divine.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need the mediator. It's the time for that is gone.
It's our birthright. Right.
It's our birthright.
Birthright. And that's why this is it's like you always bring out with astrology, right? This thing, this particular time, whatever configuration, is a great opportunity to move forward in some way, or you could ignore it and get smashed. Like Trihodos, it's a great opportunity to go within and amidst all the chaos. And what's the Rumi quote? Pierce the chaos and make a road of it. Right.
Yeah, I think these are really important insights and certainly, speak to our time very directly. And it's not going to let up. It's not going to relent. It's going to get weirder. It's going to get stranger. Definitive answers are going to become more and more elusive. So you've got to be able to kind of run with it and have something inside of yourself that is your true north and your own navigational access through this time. The one concern that I have is that, I work with a lot of people and a lot of people come to me, for readings and sessions. And one of the concerns that I have is that a lot of people have really taken on a lot of water in their lives and are really kind of on the edge. And these are good people. They may have made some critical kind of missteps or bad choices, which we all make along the way. And they're really just kind of on that cusp of being able to stay on the lifeboat and continue to move and evolve or falling off. And it really seems to be a part of this time. And I have some concern about folks like that who are, kind of white knuckling this thing a little bit. And I don't really have an answer. I don't think there's really a pat answer for that. But one of the things that blew my mind is that Bloomberg spent $500 million on these campaign ads to basically get 4 votes for American Samoa, right?
Yeah.
And he could have given he could have given 500 million people $1 million each.
Wow.
Think about that.
500 people $1 million each.
500 people $1 million. So what would be the equivalent for for was it 50? What's the population?
Let's say a million. Well, yeah.
Three
Break it down. A million. You get 500 people. A million.
$1 million. Yeah.
5,000 people. 100,000.
100,000.
You know, to just break it down that way.
Okay, so my math is wrong. Not the first time. Yeah, but it's like that. That's kind of it's just like an excess, you know.
Right. And who got that money?
Where'd the money go? Somebody
Went to the networks. The networks got the money for the commercials.
Maybe they need
Yeah.
to a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
The coffers.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but you know, this is, you know, especially with individual people, because this is a time, and I think we've all experienced it in our personal relationships, especially since the start of this year, that people who can get unhinged and will get unhinged. And that's
I'm concerned about that's true. I'm concerned about the people who don't have, let's just say, their capacity to be unhinged is really dependent upon the quality of their life.
Yes.
And not about their history or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about is that, you know, we had our event here in Texas in October, and a very, very, I think, salutary kind of experience. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there could be a place where people who didn't have a lot of resources could just go for like 30 days and just stop and just get off the wheel and have good, clean, simple food, maybe a swimming pool, you know, just stop your life. Just get off your life for about a month. And, you know, super low cost, or even, I don't know, even like operating on some kind of donation basis, and not full time, but just kind of a very low key, easy resort recuperation experience for people to have. I would love that. I think that would be great. And that's where Michael Bloomberg could have spent his money on something like that if he really wanted to be super creative. Yeah.
Like a spa for people.
Like like kind of a very easy, simple, kind of low key spa for people that are kind of on the edge like that.
Very traditional in European culture, where, you know, or even in Turkey, you have the Turkish baths, where there's a communal area where you could go, and that's rejuvenating. A mineral bath, for one thing. You know, the soils are depleted of minerals, and people's nervous systems suffer because they don't have the right minerals.
Right.
So just something as simple as a soothing bath or sauna or spa or Gold's Gym, you know, something where you could go.
Actually, they're building a Turkish bath in the place that has a salt cave is actually building a Turkish bath in Asheville.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That. Maybe not the best time for that. Maybe by the time it's built, things will pass.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, those are just thoughts that I had. Everybody kind of dovetails into this idea that there's less and less certainty, and people getting, you know, sort of unhooked because of that. And if they're already in a place where they're having a difficult time, and kind of on the edge, this is a period where it might actually push some people into some of these more desperate states.
Right, and why it's important to have, you know, what the Buddha would call the Sangha, right? And, you know, sort of what we did in October in Texas was kind of a cementing, or even a certain sense creation of a certain type of Sangha. The best we have. Sangha is just a group of people for each other's support in all this, dealing with life and trying to bring it to its, you know, highest capacity possible. So, you know, so the Sangha is how we support each other. You know, just being with Ani here supports us. You know what we're doing. You know, and that's, you know,
family is the Sangha. That's the original Sangha.
And the family is definitely Sangha, especially when they're Trump supporters.
Right.
And so they're all
buried.
They're all making sure.
So have they been watching this show? Have they been watching what's going on?
I don't know. You guys watching the show, or you just don't care less?
No. Oh, okay.
It's live. Okay, all the above. All right.
What did they say? Have they been watching it?
They've been listening since they're
listening to us. They're
Wow.
listening to us.
They're in the same room listening.
about
What do they think? Do they have any feedback? Do they have any
Yeah,
feedback?
Guys, you
feedback?
have any ideas?
What's that?
What?
So we could be closer if you want.
Do you have
Yeah,
any
get
ideas
closer,
about
get
what we
closer.
talked about?
Yeah.
Did anybody pay attention?
No, I wasn't paying close attention.
Tell them we're going to get 6 questions.
Pop quiz.
It's a high level of communication on subjects I am not familiar
Uh-huh.
with.
Okay.
Okay,
Right, so
over their head.
Chris's brother said it's a high level of communication on
Now, had we been
Subject is
talking
not-
about spring training for the Yankees?
Next show, next
Next
month.
Well, you guys are going to have an interesting dinner conversation tonight, then, aren't you?
We'll
Well,
give them.
That's why we talk to you now. We'll go back
Yeah.
to the Yankees later.
Yes.
No, you'd be able to. You'd be able to bust some of this out over dinner. Put Ani on for a second. Let's say goodbye to Ani.
Yeah,
Is she still there?
Yes, she is.
yeah, Annie's here.
There's
All right, Ani.
Hi.
Thanks again for joining us and being a
Thanks for
part of this today.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and
From time to time.
yeah, and they get to see you. They get to see your beautiful visage, which is great.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I can see that, but I can see you.
Yeah. Well, we'll catch you back in on chat. And by the way,
Yeah.
Ani's going to have kind of her magical mystery tour coming up.
That's right.
And Ani and I have been talking about her sharing some dispatches from the road on the Friday FARcast every now and little like a bird's eye view of what's happening in America. So I'm looking forward to that. See what you come up with.
Me too. I also mentioned in the chat yesterday, I don't know if you noticed, I was asking the chat fam to see if anyone would be interested in meeting along the way and maybe doing little mini segments, hearing their stories,
sweet.
anything they may want.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And kind of bring everyone into the loop, as I
Yeah.
travel around and,
That's a
and
great idea.
thread us all together even more,
Yeah, that'd be great. So anything you put together, and we'll throw it up here, and either we'll do it live or we'll do a pre-record. It'd be fun.
Or both. Sure.
Yeah, or both. Yeah, either way, whatever way works out.
Flexible, so whatever
Great.
goes.
Yeah. Well, good luck on your adventure, and we'll be talking before then,
Thank
right?
you.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
All
All
right.
All right, Crimis, another great show. Thanks for showing up.
I hope
You're
everybody
welcome.
enjoyed it. Thanks again to everyone who listened.
Hope you got a lot
Um,
out of it.
Yeah, plenty.
Anyway.
Yeah.
You hear the news and you listen to things, you have some kind of foundation for understanding what's the underlying dynamic.
So where can people go to find out more about the works that you publish?
LogosophiaBooks.com.
Right. The new website is up, logosophiabooks.com, and there's a button that says website where you can actually access, not website, podcasts, that you can actually access the URLs to all our previous shows. I'm still learning how to get things up, so I'm like a couple of shows behind, but
Oh, great.
anyway, so that's where you can pick up our books.
We have some new ones in the works.
Yep, we have a Vimeo page and a YouTube page where the videos live gathering dust, and and like I said, we have books coming out this year. Revamped, reset of Logosophia. Thanks to a number of people in Chatlandia, very generous to our Indiegogo campaign, and that was really very heartwarming, and it's it's bearing fruit. We're going to get books out, got a new website,
Allowed us to get this nice laptop computer, so we have
nice refurbished 17-inch MacBook Pro.
That's how it works. It's how it works,
So I'm extremely grateful.
we were
We-
really shocked that it was as successful as it was. We did not expect it. Oh, maybe we'll get it for $100,
I want to also speak to the generosity of this group and the people that connect in with these various shows. There was a gal, a longtime friend, over on Facebook, and her husband had been involved in a serious bout of cancer and heavy duty treatments, and she had no money. They spent it all on, couldn't even afford a cremation. So she came to me and she was freaking out. And I said, well, listen, just go and do a GoFundMe, start there, and then let's see where it goes. So I donated some money, and then I put it out to the 2 pages I have on Facebook, And a number of people from Chatlandia chimed in and gave her money, right? So she could actually, have an actual cremation and, send for her husband. So it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. And I can attest to the generosity and humanity of the people that connect in here. It's a really great bunch. Totally great.
It is,
Yeah.
forsooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys in a month.
Great.
And, I don't know what we'll talk about next. Maybe you want to continue the city theme. Maybe look at Brasilia, which is a very interesting city, or even Canberra, which is another one of these interesting kind of Luciferian sort of New World Order cities.
Designed,
you don't have
designed by a theosophist.
Yeah, you don't have to, but these are interesting ideas, obviously.
Yeah.
So in the meantime,
We'll
travel.
We'll come up with something, or maybe we'll just talk about the Yankees.
Right. I'm sure we'll have a lot of interest in that, Steve. A lot of interest in that. Well, you guys travel safe, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Yes.
Robert. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for your attention, everyone.
And that was the Crimis. Let me see if I can do this. And that was the Crimis. And that was an absolutely wonderful show that we had today on Kazakhstan, Astana, and of course the lovely and talented Ani Brito joining us as well. Let me just say a quick goodbye to Chatlandia. Let's see what we have here. Thanks. Italy would be my first choice. The wonderful people in this group, absolutely. And then there's Diana. There's Kelly. Hey, Kelly. She's in New Mexico. My man, Steven. What's going on, Steven? And what else? Ooh, she's a beauty. Ani, getting some love in Chatlandia. Hey, if you like this show, if you like this programming and you'd like to support it and continue to allow me to do this on a daily basis, I have a link in the show page, which I'll put up. And I've got some very easy levels of subscription. And if you, to the higher levels, you get some goodies. It's all very self-explanatory with the link. And I think we're going to, Alex Kazemi was going to be on this coming Friday. I have to kind of revisit that a little bit. Maybe we'll bring Alex on for half the show. I actually have a very interesting idea that involves working with somebody who is very legit psychic / channeler, and having them tap into whatever's going on with the corona world. Have to flesh that out a little bit, have to juggle the schedule. And then we're going to start to get some guests through. Steve Mercer, who of course is Freeman's producer, and he'll be helping me on the Friday show. And I think that's it. Oh, one other thing is I was talking with Glenn Streeter, and it was quite interesting. I had just used a nebulizer this morning. If you haven't discovered a nebulizer, they're really interesting little tools. And what they do is they'll take a liquid and they'll vaporize the liquid, and you can breathe this vaporized liquid into your lungs. So today I was working with a nebulizer that's built by a company called Omron, O-M-R-O-N, Omron, and very small portable unit. So I was nebulizing up a little bit of colloidal silver, some nano silver, and a few other things. And so I did that, and then kind of simultaneously, kind of an interesting quantum field experience. Glenn said that people should really be investing in these Omron nebulizers. Again, they're really good tools to have. And whether it's this COVID-19 or anything else, it's really good to keep your lungs clean and clear. And, we talked about the geoengineering. We're taking in that crap all the time. So nebulizers are a really good tool in your toolkit. And the Omron model is something you may want to look at. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks, everybody. I'll be back on Sunday night. Let's see. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step into what's possible. Once again, I'd like to thank the Crimis and, of course, their relatives down in Florida for putting them up and providing a nice space for today. And you guys take good care of yourselves. I'll see you on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live. Bye for now.